For those of you joining us, welcome to Fundraisers Friday. You're a part of the grand family that we call the Nonprofit Show. And today we're going to be talking about quick tips to ignite your board members, especially sometimes in the summer where things kind of like slow down or get drained. We got to spark up things, don't we, Tony?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've always said philanthropy never sleeps. So we got to keep people engaged, and whether it's small doses or big doses, 12 months out of the year.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's get into it because this is a lot to consume in terms of some ideas and places where we've all been. You know, we are here in this place every day because of our amazing sponsors. They include Bloomerang American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, of course, Fundraisers Friday, and then our newest member of our presenting sponsors, Holdings for Good. They are a bank for nonprofits. I'm so excited to have them join us. Banking, is one of those topics that we need to invest, no pun intended, more fully in and understand it as a sector. I'm Julia C. Patrick, again, joined by the amazing Tony Beall. Okay, first thing, revisit board expectations and policies on fundraising. How can that help us ignite our board members to be raising more money?
Well, I think that the more board members understand their full role in an organization, again, based on your organizational structure. So we're always very mindful, again, about the size of the organization. We have folks that are representing small, medium, large organizations. And so some organizations, their board really is for governance. Govern, dot the I's, cross the T's, all of that. But many, and I would say the majority of organizations rely on their board members to help support their fundraising initiatives. And I've seen lots of conversations taking place on LinkedIn about whether that's right or wrong and all of that stuff. Again, depends on the structure of your organization, depends on the market that you're in, the community, that you're serving. But I think we have an obligation as nonprofit leaders to provide our board members with job descriptions, with documents that clearly define, the expectation of serving on a board. And in a lot of cases, that means, fundraising. And I think even more so than just having something written that folks can look at and read and digest and accept, we have to provide professional development for our board members. A lot of board members show up from a place of passion and not necessarily from a place of experience when it comes to leading a nonprofit or raising money. I'll be the first to say there's a lot of connectivity between for-profit and nonprofits. The way in which we run organizations, the way in which we market, the way in which we present our stories or our message to the community. There's a lot of connectivity. A lot of times we have to remind our board members that there is that connectivity and they're not just kind of stepping into some weird gray space. But we need to provide them with the tools, the resources, the education in order to, in this particular conversation, effectively and feel like they're contributing to the raising of funds to support the mission of the organization.
Right. And I think that it needs to be part of that culture of philanthropy, that mindset that travels across the organization in different ways and different methods, but it should be present, right? It should be top of mind. And so revisiting this, I think, is really important. And I also think that it's a strong way to lead moving in. This is one of those things that when you are cultivating a new board member, this gets discussed up front. If there's a give or get, if there are board dues, if whatever the expectations are, they ultimately become financial.
And also, yes, absolutely. That all has to be clear. And I'm so glad you said that, especially, when we're prospecting board members, when we're onboarding them, to make sure that there's just that full understanding of the expectation. But also I wanted to make sure that we talked about, especially when it comes to fundraising and some of the hesitation that board members have, either because it's just not they're just not comfortable or they don't fully understand the best ways to go about it, that there are the different roles that that board members can play in supporting, raising money for the organization. And that can be prospectors or cultivators or solicitors or stewards. So all four of those roles are vital in the securing of donations and investments in the organization. And every board member can play a role in at least one of those.
Right. And I love that you said, in at least one. I'm so glad you said that, because, sometimes when you hear the word role, you think, oh, well, you've got to pick one of four and stay in that lane. So thank you for kind of opening that space up for us. Okay, let's talk about the next big thing that we advocate, and that is really revisiting impact and where the funds are going towards mission. I think a lot of times, the C-suite and leadership understands where the money's going. The board might see a financial statement or reports, but do they really understand the impact? Sometimes we all think we know, but then ultimately, because the board members aren't in it every day, they're not in your office, they're not in programming and seeing what's going on. I think there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, I love that piece of, starting every meeting with a mission moment. I think that helps center things. And if you can take the mission moment and really turn it into an impact moment, I think you got a home run.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And this is a good example, Julia, of what we were saying earlier around making sure that board members have the tools and resources necessary to be effective in their role as a fundraiser and ultimately a brand ambassador for the organization. So they need the elevator pitch. They need to have stories to share with folks when they're out in the community. They need all of the same resources, maybe in micro doses, that your fundraising team need in order to be effective. So, impact stories, understanding the mission, understanding how the funds being raised are impacting the mission, and ultimately lifting up the communities in which they're meant to serve.
Right. And I think too, we need to do like, a situation where somebody can relate to it, where somebody that's like, oh, I don't have any knowledge of, why art would impact the lives of elementary school kids. I don't have elementary school kids. I don't go to the art museum. It seems frivolous. But then if you can draw some through lines there and make it everyone's business, or virtually everyone's business, I think that that's a strong way to, conduct championing your organization. Yeah.
That's the big brain explosion comment of today, Julia, is really giving folks the information to help connect, like you said, that thread. This is why arts programming is important, because when a child or a teen, a young adult participates in this, then they're more likely to do X, Y, and Z. And when they do X, Y, and Z, this is the positive impact to the community because of that. So I'm so glad that you said that, because many times we talk very specifically about a program and the number of folks that participate in it, but we don't often talk about the ripple effect of those programs. We don't often talk, because they're hard to measure. And I think that might be part of the reason, right? But we don't talk about the ripple effect that so much of the work that takes place within a single organization actually has on the larger community.
One of my favorite stories, well, two, and really quickly, I mentioned in the green room, I could keep it short today because we have so much going on. But one of my dearest friends runs an incredibly important human services organization. And he once told me that at times when he became really overwhelmed by the poverty of our community, poverty of spirit, poverty of resources, poverty of options, he would go to the Phoenix Art Museum for a very short period of time and fill himself with the possibility of beauty and achievement. And I was like, oh my God, he should be doing ads for the museum. But do you know what I mean? It was like a really interesting thing, because you think it's a person that's, working in a completely different space would see no value in what that one nonprofit had to offer him.
Sure.
So yeah, I think it's a really interesting through line that we forget, and we need to champion that. We really do. Okay,
That's a
another
great example.
yeah, it's really lovely. It was really profound. Tip number 3: discuss quarter and year end push opportunities and issues and stances in real dollars. This, Tony, we've talked about it sometimes, where a lot of times boards wait until like the end of the year, and then it's like, wah, wah, you missed your goal. Or you know what I mean? It's not like a living thing that we're measuring. Now people within the organization are, or maybe that falls to the finance committee or whatever. But I think it's really critical to make this a present issue, so that it's not punitive, but it can ignite something, hopefully.
Absolutely. And I think the important takeaway for this particular slide, if you will, discuss quarter or year end push in real dollars, is real dollar. Let's not talk about percentages. Oh, we're 10%
Yes.
below our expectation. We are going to be $150,000 shy of meeting our goal if something doesn't happen in the next 60 to 90 days. And again, that's not punitive, that's fact. And that resonates and sits differently than if you use a percentage. So I think, again, in terms of the transparency and in communicating in the best possible way, use the real dollar amount. Let's not kind of, muddy the messaging by using a percentage that they're, well, 10% is not so bad. Well, 10% of what?
Right. I love that you said that, because I think we don't pay our bills and live our lives with percentages, right? We don't say, oh, the mortgage is going to take, 10% this month of the food bill. I mean, we say, this is where the money is. This is where it has to go. Yeah, right. I really like that you said that. That's cool.
But again, just, we talk about this often, and you just can't say it enough about the need for this level of transparency with your board of directors, and again, and kind of embracing that everyone's in this together. We're all kind of working towards the same mission and the same goals for our community. So it's not punitive. It's where we are, and it ignites the conversations around what can we all collectively do to make sure we meet our goals. And we've also talked often about how so many organizations are now adopting what would be considered a sales cycle when it comes to the work that's being done in, we talk about impact selling and what that means, and the cycle used for that. And oftentimes when organizations are using a structured cycle, they also have KPIs and OKRs. And so these things are being reported on often on a monthly basis. So the data's there for real time and transparent conversation.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I think that's a great way to approach it and to sell it to those that have to gather that information, and then those that have to receive the information and discuss it. I think that's a great way to make it be more of a strategic approach. And I also got to pitch this idea at the same time. And that is that we never talk about this and we forget this, but when we educate or we elevate the discussion on one board, generally those board members serve in other parts of their community. And so this isn't just a one and done in terms of one structured organization. A lot of times then that will bleed out into the community and make those board members where they serve in other places also stronger stewards, right? They'll take that knowledge to their board or to their executive committees and say, look, this is what we should be doing. And so I think that's a magical thing about this, to quote my book title, Building Board Champions. because it is kind of an interesting thing. So let's take that same concept and talk about um, reviewing current grant applications, seeking connections. Sometimes I think boards don't ever get this information, like unless it's like we won this grant. But
Mhm.
I like backing it up and saying this is what's in the mix. This is what we've applied for. If any of you all have a connecting point, share that with us. And it's an interesting thing, Tony. I don't know with your board service if you've ever seen this reported on in advance or like during the process.
Yeah, it is typically something that would happen after the fact. You're absolutely correct. I think more progressive kind of organizations now are having these conversations prior to a grant being submitted. But historically, it was something that I would see happen after either the reward or the, thanks but no thanks letter was, was received. But also being mindful that where this really works is not necessarily with your community foundations. Not, I'm trying to think of another good, that's kind of a good example. Many grants we know for folks that write grants are kind of rated. There's a scale and your grant is rated and, from 1 to 5. And then, depending on where you fall and your overall scoring determines on whether or not you get the funding or what percentage of funding you might receive. And so it's great to have a relationship so that you might be top of mind. But when it comes to the process of reviewing and granting the funds, it really is based on some rubric or metric where there is no bias and the relationships don't matter. It's very different, I think, when it comes to grants from corporations or funding from corporations. There you typically have someone that's the VP of Community Affairs. They're getting in the grants requests, the funding requests, the sponsorship. They're reviewing them and they're making the decision and then presenting that to whomever within their company for the stamp of approval. So there I see, and I'm not claiming that there is more bias that exists there. I'm just claiming that that's where relationships can really make more of a difference, I think, when we're talking about funding from corporate entities versus some foundations, particularly community foundations.
Yeah, I love that you pointed that out, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a part of how we advocate and we champion our board service, but it's not always 100% guaranteed. And I also believe, Tony, that it's like maybe one grant doesn't work, doesn't fit, doesn't meet that rubric, but a relationship or opportunity down the road will. And that you made that point, you bubble up to top of mind. So that's
Mhm.
why I think these things are really important because it's a more holistic approach. It's
Mhm.
not just a, one and done. Along those same lines, and you just mentioned this about talking about partnerships and sponsorships. I know for so many organizations that watch the nonprofit show, in particularly Fundraisers Friday, they're starting to those pitches. They're starting to go out and garner that underwriting for fall, holiday, end of year events, galas, community walks, whatever. I think this is an important time to also be reviewing that with your board.
Always. And again, we talked about kind of the 4 areas that board members can lean into to support fundraising, prospecting, cultivator, solicitor, steward. So definitely when we have these conversations around partnerships, board members can lean in to help steward a relationship. So thank you very much for supporting us this year. We plan on doing this, for a very long time. What's the possibility of a multi-year commitment? Can we get you to commit for the next 5 years at this level? And so, yes, so getting board members involved and kind of looking at current sponsorships and partnerships and seeing where those connections might exist. Again, super important.
Yeah, super, super important. And I love that you talked about that, moving forward and getting getting that multiple year focus and piece. Let's talk about sharing success stories and all of the things that a lot of times we know onesie twosies, or it's shared briefly, um, but we don't always see it and we don't always know it and we can't always articulate it. I think this is really important. I think it's really magical to hear from, of course, clients and the beneficiaries, but I really like connecting donor experiences.
Yeah, me too. And I think the real magic in this, Julia, is when board members are sharing their success stories
Yeah.
and donor experiences.
Yeah.
So when you're in a board meeting and another board member says, I just want to share that I met with so and so from ABC organization and secured a 5,000, whatever it is, 1,000 celebrated, right? I secured a $1,000 sponsorship for our annual gala, and sharing that with the board members so that they can see that the person sitting next to them is having success at this. And then that person can say, and this is how I did it. And this is how our development team supported me in this win. And so that we're recognizing the work that they do and providing our board members, again, with all of these tools, whether it be marketing or brochures or storytelling, but just having a board member share their success stories, and also, again, sharing what it looks like when when you have uh, as a donor to an organization, when you might have a bad experience, and kind of sharing what that looks like.
Okay, now I didn't think you would go there, but I'm glad you did. Yeah. So you know what? I hadn't thought of that necessarily. Um, but wow, you can learn from that. Also, if you need to make a correction within your own organization to that donor. But yeah, I appreciate that you brought that up. I think that's a cool way to think about that. I mean, we always say, the lessons that we learn that are the hardest ones that are the hardest, right? It's like you can have like this like magical thing and everything's hunky dory, but it doesn't stick in your brain maybe as much as something that wasn't so positive. So,
Right. I got a little tongue tied and tried to explain where my thought process was going with that. But yeah, you know, we're all donors and philanthropists in some way, shape, or form with time, talent, or treasure. And we've all had really exceptional experiences, and we've all had some that kind of let us down a little bit. So sharing both of those so that we can, strive to be that, but then make sure that we're not being this.
yeah, I love it. So the last big thing that I want to talk about is reinforcing the board members' why. Why is it that they support the organization? And I think sometimes we forget to ask that question. But I've sat on boards for years with people that I really appreciated, really thought they were cool, loved their work. They lived a completely different life than me, and then come to find out the reason why they were so passionate about the organization was X. And I always wish that I had known that ahead of time, or that I had been more connected to them that way. And I think that that's just the human piece of connection. And you can keep that private, especially if you work in something that maybe is a little dicey. I'm thinking of doing about a time years and years ago. I did a board training for a substance abuse organization, and it came out when we did this one exercise about what's your why. Everybody had a connection to addiction in their family. If it wasn't themselves, it was something that was incredibly direct. And wow, I don't want to say did it take the temperature down in the room, but it made it a sacred space.
Mm-hmm.
It moved us from what are the financials, what are the documents or the reports that we're looking at, to this is important and this is the here and the now and the why.
Mm-hmm.
And I I don't know about what you think, Tony, but I feel like we have backed off a little bit from this why, or this emotional component.
Well, yeah, I don't know that we've backed away from it. I think there's a lot of noise, Julia, that makes a lot of us believe that conversations around empathy are no longer happening. But they are happening,
Yes.
and they're happening in boardrooms with community service organizations that are uplifting so many people.
Yeah.
And it's true, a lot of times folks either give to an organization or serve on the board of an organization because of their life journey, because they somehow or another, either personally, through a family member, friend, or even a stranger,
Right?
uh, have a connection to the mission of the organization, and they are committed to, improving that scenario or situation for everyone else in their community. So I'm not surprised to hear that in that example that you found that many people, if not all, had a personal connection to the mission. And I think that we find that a lot with board members. It's either a personal connection. Again, they were moved in some way, family member, friend, or even a stranger that they saw impacted by something that shook them in some way. They're just naturally altruistic and want to give of their time, talent, or treasure, and found this particular organization to be the place where they felt the most comfortable. And maybe they like the marketing. Oh, this place is cool, this is where I'm going to go. Nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
Altruism all the time. And then there are those board members that do it to build resumes and because they're looking for some B2B, opportunities. And that's just fact.
Right.
and
I
there's,
agree with you.
and there's no judgment in that. But
Well,
those are
maybe.
well, that's not okay. I get what you're saying. I say no judgment as long as they're performing. Now, if they're
Yeah.
not performing, if they're not meeting the expectations of the role, then yeah, then yeah. But otherwise, at least they're doing something. And if that was the thing that motivated them to step up and sit in a seat and perform, then hallelujah, at least they're sitting in a seat and performing and making a difference.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that goes back to slide number one, or the first topic we had. And that is, set the parameters, set the expectations, document this. And then to those people that are looking at that, we don't have much time left, but I want to end with, these aspects of what we've been talking about. How do we reignite our board members? Really boils down to the relationship. You don't have to go out and sell, sell, sell. I think that's what tamps down this whole ecosystem of board fundraising. But if you can understand that you are developing relationships, helping cultivate champions, and pulling a community along to support a cause,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just so much easier. It's more fun. It's more rewarding. And we've got to really shift the mindset here.
Yeah, well, it's all about engaging folks to make a financial commitment or investment in a shared passion,
Yeah.
right? Where you and I are equally passionate about arts and culture, and so here's an organization I'm serving on the board for, and their arts and culture, and this is what they're doing in the community. You're like, oh my gosh, I love that so much, and I love arts and culture just like you. I want to ride the train with you. I mean, that's really what it's all about is, for board members, it's looking at your network, your kind of sphere of influence, if you will. Who else do you know that shares those same passions and inviting them along the journey?
Right. Well, we're thrilled that you are on this amazing bullet train with us on Fundraisers Friday. The amazing and remarkable Tony Beall. I am so honored that you share your wisdom and your
Oh,
time with
me
us.
too.
we have a really, really big announcement to make. I think Tony will do it next week. So I know, very exciting. But in the meantime, if you've got questions or you've got concerns, email us at info@americannonprofitacademy.com. We're both active on socials. You can reach out to us that way as well. And because this is a community conversation that we have. And so we want to make sure that we write that journey together, as Tony so beautifully said. We also have had an amazing journey with our sponsors, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and holdingsforgood.com. Okay, Tony, I love this conversation today. Thank you so much. It's really ignited something within me as well. This is the time of year when we're doing a lot of work at the Academy with boards, with getting them geared up for a new season, end of year pushes. And so thank you for this. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you too. And I really do love and appreciate that we have a conversation every week around these topics. Yes, I love it.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really a great way to kind of get somebody else's perspective, encourage somebody else, encourage ourselves, and encourage our communities. You know, we end each and every episode of the Nonprofit Show and Fundraisers Friday with this mantra, and it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well.